Joining me on the program now from the Maxim Institute, Debora Spiekermann. Debbie, kia ora, thanks for your time today.
Morning, Andrew.
This is a complex and contentious issue. Firstly, if you could unpack and explain what is surrogacy, particularly from a New Zealand point of view. What does that look like in practice here in New Zealand?
Yeah, so there's different forms of surrogacy. There is so-called gestational surrogacy, where a woman will be implanted with an embryo that is not genetically related to her.
Mm-hmm.
The other form would be traditional surrogacy, where the woman is pregnant with her own child and a donor sperm. And in both of those cases, the outcome of surrogacy is supposed to be the passing on of that child after birth to new parents.
So basically, womb for rent. In some ways, that somebody else gives birth to a baby on behalf of somebody else. And
exactly, it is a womb for rent situation, and you might say in New Zealand it's the case that the surrogate mother is not allowed to accept any huge financial pay for that. In other countries globally, women are financially compensated for that.
So at least some safeguards in terms of what's happening here in New Zealand, but in other parts of the world, easy to see how people could be exploited, as well as some of the risks involved, a situation of exploitation and pretty much human trafficking of babies.
That's right. And even though in New Zealand we don't have the commercial model, so we have the altruistic surrogacy, we still have the same risks and medical risks and emotional harms coming in both scenarios. They're present. So when we look at surrogacy in general, we see that mother and baby are at much higher risk for health complications. In order for the mother to even receive the genetically strange embryo, she needs to take immune suppressants with potential long-term health effect. The mother post-birth is at a much higher risk for postpartum depression, PTSD, anxiety, trauma, all of that, because obviously a woman is not a machine. So she's carrying this baby for months in her womb. It might not be her own, it might be her own. And when it finally arrives and the momentous moment of birth comes, first thing she has to do is to pass it on. She has a huge buildup of oxytocin, of hormones that have basically no release. So that leaves her with a high risk of mental harm. And this is present in commercial surrogacy as well as in altruistic surrogacy. And this also might be happening in New Zealand. And actually, there is evidence that surrogate mothers in New Zealand have expressed a loss of dignity, an experience of feeling used and feeling saddened by the process. So it is something that we need to look into closely.
Certainly, you can understand why the UN is concerned about this practice, but honestly, Debbie, there's a little bit that this pushes up against the idea of informed consent and a woman's right to do with her body as she chooses. That sort of personal sovereignty of the body. And whilst in terms of the right to the abortion, which is something which the UN advocates for, that a woman can choose to be pregnant or not pregnant, this seems to be flowing in the opposite direction of that. Any thoughts?
Yeah, that's actually quite interesting, because in a scenario or in a surrogacy arrangement, women almost give up their the sovereignty over their body, because they're essentially letting their body to be used for somebody else's means. So, for example, if the intending parents decide that they don't want the child anymore, or it has a disability, the surrogate might be legally bound to have a termination of that pregnancy, which might be against her will. Another point on that is personal sovereignty and freedom is great, and we all appreciate it and we all enjoy it. But we also want protection of our freedom. So personal sovereignty doesn't go to an unlimited extent. If I'm at risk, if I'm at serious risk, psychological risk, and physical risk, it is good that there are laws in places to protect me, because laws are there to protect the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
And the UN has come to the conclusion that in a surrogacy arrangement, the woman is just in this whole setting at a very high risk of being exploited. So I would like to kind of draw this little picture. The process in New Zealand is still very expensive. So couples pay up to 50,000 New Zealand dollars
Yep.
for this whole process. The doctors are getting paid, the clinic is getting paid. Everybody is getting compensated and is kind of safe. But the person who is at most risk, the mother, the surrogate mother who is pregnant,
Yep.
she takes the highest risk. She will probably carry psychological consequences, even physical consequences from that, and out of a motive of altruism. So we can see how this altruistic motive sort of leaves women vulnerable to exploitation from strangers that have no sort of obligation towards her.
I know there are cases here in New Zealand, and there's likely to be people listening who have some type of connection with a surrogacy arrangement, where people have said, hey, my heart was broken for my brother and his wife. They weren't able to have children, and I've had all the children that I wanted, so I made the decision, in the same way that somebody might say, hey, I'm going to give up one of my kidneys for a family member so that they can have their life extended. I'm going to make this sacrifice, this informed sacrifice, aware of the risk, because I want to bless somebody that I care for. Is there a space for this, where there's a relationship, where there is informed consent, where people know the risks involved, but the relationship is more important than that? Do you think there's an argument or a space for that, Debbie?
So I think when we look at surrogacy arrangements, we often see 3 adults consenting to something. It's mostly a father, a mother, and a surrogate mother. Mm-hmm. The perspective we often don't think of actually is the perspective of the child, which is also a human being in this process, and has no say in all of this. And studies have also greatly pointed out that being born through surrogacy is proven to negatively impact mental and physical development. We know now a lot about attachment theory, so how important it is for the continuation of the bond between baby in the womb and mother. Once it's born, the first thing you do is you put the baby on the mother's chest, and it's that security, that bond that the baby needs. So even in sort of a setting of family, you still separate the two. You still separate the mother from the child, and there will be harm to that. So I think we can paint a perfect picture, but maybe we actually forget the perspective of the child. Plus, informed consent is really only possible if the woman is informed about all of the health risks. And as there is an incentive to making some profit through this process as well, I am not quite sure if the consent is and the information is complete.
It is a complicated issue from a bioethics point of view, emotionally, spiritually, legally, all those sorts of things as well. The UN have said this is their recommendation, that there would be a global ban. Of course, the UN often comes up with things like this, and then individual countries get to decide how they apply that. What do you think happens next in this space? As a society here in New Zealand, is this something where we should have some grown-up conversations about the risks of surrogacy and what type of laws and safeguards we should have here, rather than just saying, oh, the UN said it's a good idea, we should all do that then? Yeah,
right. I think in most cases, countries don't really love to have the UN come in and say what to do and how their laws need to change. That's obviously understandable. Although what I can say to that is that New Zealand has signed up to the Human Rights Convention. So New Zealand has a great obligation to be on the watch for human rights, for every right of the child. And the report states that laws that prohibit, that allow surrogacy are in conflict with those human rights, especially with the rights of the child, also with the rights of the mother. So I think it's worth it to take a close look at where New Zealand laws might be in conflict with those particular human rights and the rights of the child, and not kind of see it only from, oh, the UN says this perspective, so now we need to act, but what laws does New Zealand abide by and stand by, and in what ways might those laws be in conflict with the harms that come from surrogacy?
It is certainly a complicated issue, particularly when you bring in, okay, what about the adoption situation and some of the complexities that happen with that, and of course the rights of the child very much ignored when it comes to abortion law in New Zealand. Some important conversations to have, and thank you for the research you've done, for jumping into this one. Now, in terms of people being able to follow up more on this, is this going to be an article published on the Maxim website? Debbie, where can people find out more?
Yes, there's a column is on the way. So if you, with more resources tagged into it. So if you're interested in this and want to read more and understand more, look up on Maxim.
Maxim.org.nz. Debbie, thanks for the work you do. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.